You see the man Elijah. He stands before the most powerful person in this world, King Ahab. And he says something absolutely crazy. He looks the king in the eye and tells him the sky is now closed. He says there will be no rain, not even dew on the grass, until he, Elijah, gives the word. Think about that for a second. This isn't a suggestion. It's not a polite request. It is a declaration of power from a man with no army, no political office, no worldly authority at all. He just walks in, speaks a sentence that will shatter the nation's economy and future, and then he walks out. Ahab is the king. He has soldiers and prisons. He can have a man killed with a single command. Yet Elijah stands there completely exposed and speaks with a terrifying finality. Where does that come from? What forges a person into someone who can do that? We look at a figure like Elijah, and we might think he was just born different. Maybe he was a superhero of the faith, a spiritual giant who never felt fear. But the Bible doesn't present him that way. It shows a man, a very human man. And if we look closely at his story, we can see the things that built his boldness. It wasn't a personality trait. It was something forged in his relationship with God. It all started with who he was and who he served. Before he even says what he's going to say to Ahab, he introduces himself. He says, "As the Lord, the God of Israel, lives, whom I serve." That's the foundation for everything that follows. It's not, "I, Elijah, have a complaint." It's, "The living God, the one I work for, has something to say." His identity was completely wrapped up in God's. He saw himself not as a citizen of Israel first or as a subject of Ahab, but as a servant of the God who was actually alive. That's a huge distinction. For most people in Israel at that time, God was a concept, a tradition. For Ahab and his wife Jezebel, the popular gods were Baal and Asherah, gods of rain and fertility. These were transactional gods. You did a ritual, you offered a sacrifice, and you hoped to get a result. They were predictable, manageable forces. But Elijah's God wasn't a force to be managed. He was a person to be known. Elijah's opening line is a challenge. He's essentially telling Ahab, "Your gods of rain are dead statues, but my God is alive. And because he lives, I stand here. And because I serve him, I speak his words, not my own." This shifts the entire power dynamic. In that throne room, it looks like one poor prophet against one powerful king. But in Elijah's mind, it's the king of the universe against a temporary local ruler. When your boss is the one who created the sky, you're not that intimidated by the man who just wears a crown under it. His boldness didn't come from self-confidence. It came from God-confidence. He wasn't relying on his own courage or his own cleverness. He was a messenger, and the messenger's only job is to deliver the message faithfully. The power is in the one who sent him, not the one who carries the mail. After this incredible confrontation, God immediately sends Elijah away, and he tells him to go hide by a little brook called Kerith, and this is the next piece of what built his boldness. He learned radical, moment-by-moment dependence on God for his very survival. He's now a fugitive, the most wanted man in the country. He has no food, no water source other than this stream, no protection. He is completely vulnerable. And what does God do? He sends ravens to bring him bread and meat. Every morning and every evening, these birds, considered unclean by Jewish law, become his lifeline. Imagine what that does to a person's faith. You wake up hungry, alone, with a death sentence on your head. You have no plan for breakfast. And then you hear the flap of wings, and there it is. Food. Not once, but day after day after day. This isn't a theological idea. This is tangible. It's real. God isn't just a concept in a scroll. He is the one who makes sure you don't starve. Elijah is learning in his gut, in his bones, that God is a provider. He is trustworthy. If God can command birds to feed you in the middle of nowhere, maybe, just maybe, he can also protect you when you're standing in front of a king. Boldness isn't built in the big moments. It's built in the small, daily acts of trust. It's the quiet practice of dependence. Each meal delivered by a raven was like another layer of steel being added to his spine. He was learning, in solitude, that God's word is real. God said, "I have directed the ravens to supply you with food there." And the ravens did. So when God says, "Go stand before Ahab," the foundation of trust is already there. Elijah has a history with God. He has seen God keep his promises in the small things. So he has reason to believe God will keep his promises in the big things too. Then the brook dries up. The drought he announced is now affecting him. And God gives him another strange command. "Go at once to Zarephath." This was in the region of Sidon. This was the heart of Baal worship. It was Jezebel's home country. God was sending him from the frying pan into the fire. He was sending him deep into enemy territory. And who was he supposed to find there for help? A widow. In that culture, a widow was the picture of poverty and powerlessness. He arrives and finds her, just as God said. She's gathering sticks to make one last tiny meal for herself and her son before they lie down and die. That's how bad the drought is. And Elijah asks her for a staggering thing. He asks her to make him a small cake of bread first, with the very last of her flour and oil. It sounds selfish, even cruel, but it's a test of faith for both of them. And he gives her a promise from God. The jar of flour will not be used up, and the jug of oil will not run dry until the day the Lord sends rain on the land. The widow takes this massive leap of faith. She obeys, and the miracle happens. Every day, there's just enough flour and just enough oil, not a storehouse full, just enough for the day. This was another profound lesson for Elijah. He had just seen God provide supernaturally through birds. Now he was seeing God provide supernaturally through a simple jar and jug. He was living inside a miracle day in and day out. He was learning that God's economy is not like man's. God doesn't need storehouses or supply chains. His resources are infinite. This experience solidified another truth in Elijah's heart. This God is in control of life's essentials. Ahab and Baal were supposed to be the ones who controlled the rain, the grain, the oil, the fertility of the land. That was their whole brand. But here, in the heart of Baal's territory, Elijah was watching the God of Israel provide flour and oil supernaturally, while the land withered under the drought he had declared. He wasn't just hearing that God was more powerful than Baal, he was living it. He was eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner because of it, but the lesson goes even deeper. The widow's son gets sick and dies. The woman is devastated. She turns on Elijah, blaming him. And Elijah is crushed. He takes the boy to his room and he cries out to God. This isn't a polite, formal prayer. It's a raw, desperate cry. Lord my God, have you brought tragedy even on this widow I am staying with by causing her son to die? He stretches himself out on the boy 3 times and pleads, Lord my God, let this boy's life return to him. And God hears him. The boy's life returns. He breathes again. Elijah brings him downstairs and gives him back to his mother. This was the ultimate lesson. God had proven he could provide food from the sky and oil from an empty jar. Now he had proven he had power over life and death itself. Baal was the god of fertility and life. But here, in a humble home, the God of Israel had just defeated death. After you have seen God raise the dead, what threat can a mortal king possibly hold over you? If the worst thing a king can do is kill you, and you serve the God who can bring you back from that, fear starts to lose its grip. This wasn't a theory for Elijah. He had held the dead boy in his arms, and then he had held the living boy in his arms. His boldness was not the absence of fear. It was the presence of a faith that had seen the absolute power of God in the most personal and profound way imaginable. So when the time comes after 3 years, and God says, go and present yourself to Ahab, Elijah is ready. He has a history with God. He has seen his provision. He has seen his power over life and death. He has a deep, personal, living relationship. The confrontation that follows is one of the most dramatic scenes in the entire Bible. It takes place on Mount Carmel. Elijah challenges Ahab to gather all the people of Israel and 450 prophets of Baal, plus 400 prophets of Asherah. It's one man against 850. The odds are ridiculous, but Elijah isn't thinking about the odds, and he's thinking about clarity. His goal is not to win an argument or to make himself look good. His goal is singular to prove who the real God is. This is another key to his boldness. His mission was not about himself. It was about God's reputation. He stands before the people and says, how long will you waver between 2 opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him, but if Baal is God, follow him. He is forcing a choice. He is trying to bring an end to the spiritual confusion that has poisoned the nation. When your motive is pure, when it's about God's glory and not your own, it's incredibly freeing. You're not worried about what people will think of you. You're not worried about protecting your own reputation. You're just a vessel. Elijah sets up a contest. 2 bulls, 2 altars. The prophets of Baal can have first choice. They will prepare their bull, but not light the fire. Elijah will do the same. Then they will each call on the name of their God. The God who answers by fire, Elijah declares he is God. The prophets of Baal go first. From morning until noon, they call out, Baal, answer us. But there is nothing, just silence. They start dancing and limping around their altar. Elijah, filled with a holy confidence, begins to mock them. Shout louder, he says. Perhaps he is deep in thought or busy or traveling. Maybe he is sleeping and must be awakened. This isn't just trash talk, it's a theological statement. He's pointing out the absurdity of a God who might be busy. The living God is always present. An idol is just a block of wood or stone. They get more frantic. They start cutting themselves with swords and spears, a common practice in their worship, until their blood flows. They rave and prophesy all afternoon. Still, nothing. No voice, no answer, no sign that anyone is listening. Their desperation just highlights their God's impotence. Then it's Elijah's turn. He calls the people to him. He calmly rebuilds the Lord's altar, which had been torn down. He uses 12 stones, one for each tribe of Israel, a powerful symbol of unity and covenant. He digs a trench around it. He lays the wood, cuts the bull into pieces, and places it on the wood. And then he does something that seems insane. He has the people bring 4 large jars of water and pour them over the offering and the wood. They do it a second time, and a third time. Water runs down the altar and fills the trench. He is making it absolutely impossible for this to be a trick. There's no way for a fire to start naturally. He is creating a situation where only God can act. He is backing himself into a corner publicly, where his only escape is a genuine miracle. This is the ultimate act of faith-filled boldness. He is so confident in his God that he is willing to risk total humiliation on a national stage. Then he steps forward and prays. His prayer is not long and frantic like the prophets of Baal. It is short, simple, direct, and powerful. Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant and have done all these things at your command. Answer me, Lord, answer me, so these people will know that you, Lord, are God, and that you are turning their hearts back again. Notice the focus. Let it be known that you are God. Let them know I am your servant. Let them know I did this because you commanded it. Turn their hearts back. It's all about God's glory, God's command, and God's people. Elijah has removed himself from the equation, and the fire of the Lord falls. It consumes the offering, the wood, the stones, the soil, and even licks up the water in the trench. It is a decisive, terrifying, and unmistakable answer. The people see it, and they fall on their faces. They cry out, "The Lord, He is God. The Lord, He is God." In that moment, Elijah's boldness is completely vindicated. And it wasn't arrogance. It wasn't recklessness. It was a deep, settled confidence in the character and power of the living God he served. He knew God. He had a clear command from God. He had a history of God's provision, and he was motivated by God's glory. That was a recipe for his courage. But the story doesn't end there, and if it did, we would be left with the impression that Elijah was a superhero, a man without weakness. The Bible is more honest than that. After this incredible mountaintop experience, this stunning public victory, we see a completely different side of Elijah. Ahab goes and tells his wife Jezebel everything that happened. He tells her how Elijah executed all her prophets. Jezebel is furious. She sends a messenger to Elijah with a simple, chilling threat. "May the gods deal with me, be it ever so severely, if by this time tomorrow I do not make your life like that of one of them." And what does Elijah do? The man who stood down a king, who mocked 450 prophets, who called down fire from heaven, he runs for his life. He is terrified. He runs a day's journey into the wilderness, sits down under a broom tree, and prays for God to kill him. "I have had enough, Lord," he says. "Take my life. I am no better than my ancestors." This is shocking. It feels like a total collapse. How can the same man be so bold one day and so broken the next? This is perhaps the most important part of understanding his boldness. It shows us that his courage was not his own. It was not a permanent internal resource he could draw on whenever he wanted. His boldness was directly connected to his focus. On Mount Carmel, his eyes were fixed on God. In the wilderness, his eyes were fixed on Jezebel's threat. On the mountain, he saw himself as a servant of the God of the universe. Under the broom tree, he saw himself as a lonely, hunted man who was no better than his ancestors. His perspective shifted from God's power to his own weakness and exhaustion. And in that shift, his courage evaporated and was replaced by fear and despair. This makes Elijah incredibly human and relatable. His moment of weakness doesn't undermine his moments of boldness. It actually clarifies their source. His courage wasn't about being fearless. It was about acting in faith despite fear because he was focused on God. When he lost that focus, the fear took over. And how does God respond to his broken, fearful prophet? He doesn't rebuke him. He doesn't tell him to be strong and courageous. He meets him in his humanity. He sends an angel. The angel touches him and says, "Get up and eat." There's a cake of bread baked over hot coals in a jar of water. Elijah eats and drinks and lies down again. The angel comes back a second time and tells him to eat again, for the journey is too much for you. And God's first response to Elijah's spiritual and emotional crisis is to care for his physical needs. He gives him food, water, and rest. There's a picture of profound grace. God understands that sometimes our deepest despair is linked to our physical and emotional exhaustion. He ministers to the whole person, strengthened by that food. Elijah travels for 40 days and 40 nights to Horeb, the mountain of God. This is the same mountain where Moses met with God and received the law. God is leading Elijah back to the source, back to the place of covenant. He takes refuge in a cave, and God asks him a gentle, probing question, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" Elijah pours out his heart. "I have been very zealous for the Lord God Almighty. The Israelites have rejected your covenant, torn down your altars, and put your prophets to death with the sword. I am the only one left, and now they are trying to kill me too." It's a mix of self-pity, truth, and exaggeration. He feels utterly alone and defeated. God then gives him an object lesson. A great and powerful wind tears the mountains apart, but the Lord is not in the wind. After the wind, there is an earthquake, but the Lord is not in the earthquake. After the earthquake comes a fire, but the Lord is not in the fire. Elijah had just seen God answer by fire on Mount Carmel. He was a man of the dramatic, the powerful, the spectacular. But God is showing him that his presence is not always in the big noisy displays of power. And after the fire comes a gentle whisper, a still, small voice. When Elijah hears it, he pulls his cloak over his face and goes to the mouth of the cave. The loud, impressive things were just the prelude. God's true presence, the intimate communication, is in the quiet. This is the final, crucial piece of Elijah's story. God is recalibrating him. He's reminding him that true strength doesn't come from the fire on the mountain or the cheers of the crowd. It comes from the quiet, personal, intimate relationship with him. The boldness to face kings comes from the stillness of listening to a gentle whisper in a cave. God then gives Elijah new instructions. He gives him a purpose again. He anoints new kings. He calls his successor Elisha. He reminds Elijah that he is not, in fact, alone. There are 7,000 in Israel who have not bowed the knee to Baal. So what made Elijah so bold? It was his living, breathing relationship with a God he knew to be real and present. It was the clarity of the mission God gave him, which freed him from personal ambition. It was the history he had with God, a history filled with ravens and endless oil, and a boy brought back to life, which built a deep-seated trust in God's provision and power. It was his singular focus on God's glory which lifted the burden of success or failure from his own shoulders. And, just as importantly, his moments of fear and despair show us that this boldness was a gift, not a personality. It was something he depended on God for, moment by moment. When he focused on God, he could face down an empire. When he focused on the threat, he crumbled in fear. Elijah was not a man of stone. He was a man, as the New Testament says, with a nature like ours. He experienced fear and doubt and depression, but he also experienced the living power of God in a way that transformed him, at critical moments, into one of the boldest figures in history. His strength was never in himself. It was in the one he served, the living God. And that in the end was all he needed.